Hello, I'm Ghost and I'm your host, and today we'll be talking about Lacey's Flash games, something that admittedly I'd avoided talking about for quite some time due to some negative feelings. You see, I'm gonna open this video with a little bit of a complaint. Okay, so several years ago, I happened to be working on an iceberg of internet horror, encompassing every bit of horror that I could think of that I believed had a place on the list for originating on the internet and being interesting enough to talk about. That ended up never happening and kind of just being turned into the beginner's guide of analog horror video several years later. But I'm still salty about a couple things, because there were some series that I found when they were very small that blew the fuck up, and Lacey's is one of them. Complaint out of the way, very happy for the creator for getting the attention they deserve, because Lacey's Flash Games really and truly is an example of analog horror at its best. Quick note, I will say, going to call it analog horror for a chunk of the video. I know a lot of people are angry because it's digital horror. I will get there, bear with me. Lacey's Flash Games is a analog horror series created by Ghost Tundra. Oh, look at that. Ghost Buddies. Fist bump. They're from Brazil! And they're pretty cool, and they've made some really interesting stuff, though Lacey's is the thing that fits my channel the most, so that's what we're talking about. Lacey's Flash Games is a really interesting exploration of childhood trauma, sexual abuse, and the wonderful world of old internet. Because it uses Flash games as a main way of telling its story. Something that, at this point, a lot of people in my generation have had experiences with in their youth, and now feel a great amount of nostalgia for. Hey, look at that. It's almost like I have a video talking about nostalgia and its relation to horror and it being twisted. Lacey's Flash Games, though, really is an interesting piece of internet horror, as it is a light shining in a sea of absolute fucking dookie. Alright, I mean, honestly, it is so much better than 90% of the shit that's been coming out recently, and I feel like it's hard not to talk about it, especially with some of the moments in here being some of the most genuinely uncomfortable in the genre without making it feel like it's ever in just straight poor taste, as I believe that it really is handling things with a certain care that a lot of other series, High Urban Spook, doesn't exactly do. Lacey's Flash Games is really quite brilliant in its way of exploring some serious topics and expressing some personal struggles through an art form that has infinite potential to do so. I feel like the vast majority of analog horror is all about telling a good story, which is of course very important. But Lacey's takes it to a new level, as not only is it focusing on telling a good story, but the story really is trying to mean something, and I think that's quite respectable. I believe Lacey's is really and truly going to have a heavy hand in reviving an otherwise dying scene. As let's be honest here, horror on the internet sure has been getting stale. A friend of mine compared the sea of analog horror to that of old slasher films. We started off strong, low-budget movies making a big impact and being really quite good, but people recognize the success and start ripping it off. And suddenly, this once niche genre has become extremely overpopulated. And eventually, it stops getting the attention, and it is dead. But it gets revived eventually, as after being dead for some time, more creative filmmakers decide to revisit the skeleton, having grown up with the genre, and begin to somehow start just sticking flesh back on the skeleton, and somehow magically the skeleton becomes alive again. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that a lovely little visual I just created? I believe that Lacey's is certainly helping with that process, as I believe that it is going to inspire heavily future creators trying to make analog and digital horror, as it has helped popularize the genre of digital horror, which I think is partially single-handedly reviving analog horror, as analog horror relies on nostalgia that I feel like at this point a lot of the viewers don't have. Digital horror focuses on the stuff that way more people are nostalgic for, which is, the internet. And so the viewer base of analog horror goes over to that, and I think that it hits a lot harder with those audiences. Hence why I believe that digital horror is essentially being the saving grace of analog horror. The reason I'm calling Lacey's an analog horror series is because, let's be honest here, I don't think digital horror is an entirely separate genre. It's really an offshoot of analog horror. It's a subgenre. An important one, but it is a subgenre. All this being said, Lacey's Flash games, specifically, really is a brilliantly made series, with some great art, great storytelling, and a really, really unique approach to creating this type of thing. As I feel with a lot of things in this scene, analog and digital horror, a lot of the spookiness comes from just kinda flashing shit up on the screen and being like, look at this fucked up picture. I feel like Lacey's most intense moments isn't when it has those types of payoffs, but when it's building up to these moments. As Lacey's is a remarkably stressful series to watch. It's not kind of just like all of a sudden something turns twisted. Rather, Lacey's is a slow spiral downward, and it just keeps getting more and more unfortunate. While undoubtedly not without its problems, Lacey's really does take a unique approach to handling the topics that it handles. And I think that that's something that anyone can appreciate. There are a lot of scenes that are going to stick with me forever, or for a long time at least, particularly in episode 3, once we enter that little hell arena of total chaos and horror. The pigs eating the flowers that resemble, the pig uncle eating the innocents, stuff like that. Really interesting stuff. Or in the 4th episode, the twist in which Jay is killed and then Lacey finds out about Jay's death through working at a mortuary. That shit is really fucking interesting. Lacey's really is a powerful series, not only as a horror series, but just as a series in general. It has a certain emotional side to it that of the vast majority of series similar to it don't. I believe that the only thing that I can easily compare it to within the umbrella of analog horror would be Boisvert or Boisvert, or however the fuck you're supposed to say it. That is really the only other series in the genre that I can easily say is primarily driven by the emotions that are represented in the series. Though that's really the most I can relate between the two series. Some of the flaws in the series includes some slight continuity errors, the Nirvana shirt to the Deftones t-shirt, back to the Nirvana shirt. Come on, guys. Some weird little errors, just spelling and grammar-wise, which at times I think are intentional, but at the same time break immersion, because this is being made by, what, I think the website's probably in universe made by, 19 or 20-year-olds, so I feel like they have the time to put in the attention to detail if they're able to make these full games with such, deep lore, to just fix up a few weird spelling issues. And also, I feel like the story at a few points gets a little bit too slow in the way it unfolds. While I think that the non-breakneck pace certainly is a good thing, and I believe is clearly inspired by the Walton Files. Oh my god, there's so many parallels you can make between the two series. There are some points in Lacey's where I believe it gets a little bit too slow for its own good, and I think it needs to kind of pick itself back up. On the other hand, some of the big strengths in Lacey's, besides its art style and its series topics, I would like to say that something nice about a lot of analog horror, but especially Lacey's, is the fact that despite the fact that it's, dealing with some really crazy, serious, and dark stuff, it doesn't you know, always feel like that. It's able to make the occasional casual joke or something, just to remind you that, yeah, this is fiction, don't let it get to your head too much or anything. And I think that's respectable. You know, the fact that analog horror has room for a little bit of humor, once again, what the fuck, Urban Spook, you can't put, like, one joke in, you just gotta constantly be edgy. You know, it's kind of nice having that flexibility, where you don't constantly have to be suffocating the viewer. You can, you know, make it happen in parts. Lacey's really is just a powerful tale that deals with things that no other analog horror series, at least at this level of popularity, has done. And I think that, really and truly, it's going to help revive this horribly, horribly suffering, dying genre.
Oh shit, he got in!
Oh hey man, you want some of this?
I mean, it's not just dying of old age, the shit is not that old. It's been, like, shot in the spine 12 times. It's not doing well. But I believe that Lacey's is going to easily help revive it, as it seems as though it's really inspired a lot of creators, and you can tell by how many people are asking about advice creatively in the Q&A with the creator. You can tell that it's inspiring a lot of people, and it's given me hope for this genre to come back. I've been watching analog horror for a long time. I started off with Local 58, which is certainly not one of the more recent series, and so I do have a certain attachment to it. While it's not necessarily my favorite genre of horror, nor is it the focus of my channel, it's something that I'm always happy to talk about, and when there's a series like this that really is pushing creative boundaries and really changing the game, I get seriously excited. And Lacey's has essentially single-handedly reawoken my own interest in the scene, which has waned terribly in recent time. So thank you, Lacey's, for helping revive this important genre of horror. I know I've said that a lot throughout the video, but seriously, I feel like its importance to the scene can't be understated. There's a lot of shit out there. Lacey's is not to be put in that category. While it's not necessarily my favorite series in the wonderful world of analog horror, it's certainly in the upper echelon of series. And I feel like, you know, if you got some time to kill, give it a try. You know, there's a lot to be found, there's a lot to think about, but it doesn't go too crazy to the point where it's like this super multi-leveled ARG like some series. Also, the reason that I decided to talk about Lacey's now is because, you know, they're actually making a game. Isn't that cool? Now, while I don't necessarily want to dig into it too much, considering that it's just a demo that's out currently, I will say that I'm very excited to see what it has to offer. And if you've seen the series and you liked it, you should totally check out the demo. As you can imagine, it's fucking free. itch.io, Steam, check it out. I'm excited to see what Lacey's has to offer in the future, and in general, I'm excited to see what Ghost Tundra has to offer in the future. Again, Lacey's is their claim to fame, but they certainly have some other stuff worth your time on the channel. They're a remarkably inspirational and unique creator that seems very down-to-earth and kind, and what they're doing really is unique, and I have a great amount of respect for it. So thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, you know, I really danced around a lot of the plot as to keep a lot of it a mystery to those who haven't seen it. So if you haven't seen it, please go watch it. You know, it really is worth your time. It's a little under an hour in full currently, and yeah, I have a feeling you won't regret it. So thank you for getting this far in the video. Thank you for clicking on it in the first place. And I hope to see you again in the future. I'm Ghost. I've been your host.